Oh, wait, hold on, let me retry that.
That's a really cool slide. I like it.
Admittedly, just this took me about 3 hours to do. You would not believe there's no black tables on Google and there's no envelopes on Google.
And now you're gonna be on some sort of list, because you pulled an envelope with white powder and put it.
Anyway,
I'll bail you out.
yeah. So, my name is Anthrax. I'm going to be going over a holistic explanation about what anthrax is.
What I really like is the period.
Yeah. And during this presentation, I'll be going over the nomenclature, the pathology, the biochemistry, and the characteristics of the pathology, any treatments, and any final questions that anybody has. Now, I should mention during this presentation, there will be graphic images, and if there is a graphic image, you will see this image at the bottom of the screen, which indicates that the next slide has said graphic images, as well as any source that I have if that slide has a source that I used. Now, before I begin, do I have any comments, questions, concerns?
No,
All
let's
right.
freaking do this.
Why so serious? I mean, I feel like I need to leave.
Because I was a teacher at some point. Anyway, so let's start off. What exactly is anthrax? Anthrax is defined as a systemic and local infection that has been caused by Bacillus anthracis that induces necrosis. Now, the hallmark symptom for anthrax is the black sores that arise from skin necrosis. And the best part about this is that it is both non-contagious and it can be treated and prevented easily if it is caught early. That's the big word though, early. Now, a little bit of history about anthrax. Anthrax is actually Greek for the word coal, which is very fitting because if you actually see these black sores, they really do look like the surface of coal, which is disturbing. There have been very vague descriptions actually seen in religious texts, specifically in the KJV version of the Christian Bible in Exodus 9, and the Torah, which is actually a subsection of the Bible. And I did see a little bit of description in the Quran, but it was really hard to tell. But basically, it's just describing what crops were and were not infected, which fit the description of anthrax, which I thought was really cool. The bacterium was first discovered in 1823, and as mentioned earlier, the causative agent of the disease is Bacillus anthracis, which causes the disease anthrax. Anthrax was also used to first develop the Koch postulates. And if you know anything about the Koch postulates, that is messed up. And of course, the first attenuated vaccine using Bacillus anthracis was developed by Louis Pasteur in 1823. And this is a very relevant pathogen to us because of a recent biological attack directly 1 week after 9/11, which is done by a doctor who sent a bunch of spores of anthrax in mail to certain politicians. I believe like 5 died and 11 were actually affected. And unfortunately, the doctor was not caught. He actually killed himself before they managed to do that. A little bit about beta, why do you say beta? Bacillus anthracis. It is gram variable, which means that it is sometimes gram positive and sometimes gram negative. It's either or. It's really weird.
I've never heard of that. Yeah.
And it was really hard to figure out which one it was, and that's probably because of a characteristic of Bacillus anthracis, which I'll get to in a second. It is small, about 1 micrometer to 4, and if you want some reference, the width of your hair is about 50 micrometers wide. Sometimes it's aerobic or facultatively anaerobic, which means that it sometimes needs oxygen, but sometimes it doesn't really need that much. Again, this is a weird thing. It's rod-shaped, spore-forming, and like I mentioned earlier, it is non-infectious. Now, the crazy thing about Bacillus anthracis is that it is highly resilient to a lot of treatment options in order to eradicate it. It's very non-susceptible to things like dehydration, high temperatures, UV radiation, toxic chemicals, and it is very hard to degrade with proteases and lysozymes. And again, I actually believe that is because of the fact that one of the plasmids that it has, specifically PXO2, makes a protein capsule. Which, if you know anything about bacteria, a protein capsule is not normal. Normally, capsules are carbohydrate-based. And that's just a little picture I found of Bacillus anthracis. But what I want to talk about most right now is what PXO1 actually makes. And these PXO blah blahs are plasmids that are part of bacteria. They are extra chromosomal DNA. They're not actually part of bacteria's chromosome. But PXO1 encodes for three things: the lethal factor, the protective antigen, sometimes protective factor, and the edema factor, which, if you ever forget, down here. I'm going to be referring to them as LF, PA, and EF from now on. So, first things first, what you're looking at right now is the protective antigen. This is the monomer unit of the protective antigen, and then this is either going to be a heptamer or an octamer unit of PA. And when I get down later into the biochemistry of how this works, you're going to see how this one is formed from this. But just so you know right now, this is what initially binds to receptor tyrosine kinase molecules, receptor tyrosine kinase receptors. And this blue portion is actually cut off by an enzyme called furin, which is about 20 kilodaltons in size, which leaves behind 63 kilodalton in size protein. And then the other two is your edema factor and your lethal factor. And these two are really, really cool. Now this, first of all, is a messed up disease. This sucks. But these proteins are really cool. The red portion, at least on this side, is the edema factor. This is an ATP molecule, and this is a calmodulin molecule. On this side is your lethal factor. Did I say this is your edema factor? I don't know if I messed up, but this is your lethal factor, and this green portion right here is a chunk of a protein called your MEK. And I'll get to that here in a second. Moving along into pathology. So there are three elements of each type of anthrax that I want to talk about, which is going to be the biochemistry, how it actually works inside the body or a cell, some of the characteristics, and the treatments that are available. And the 5 types of anthrax that I'm going to be talking about are your cutaneous, inhalation, gastrointestinal, welders, and injection, with inhalation being the absolute worst. Now, let's actually talk about the biochemistry. This is a mess, and I hated this. Thankfully, I'm not talking about any of this, except this box right here. Now, there is a very, very strong distinction I need to make between apoptosis and necrosis. Anthrax is a disease that causes necrosis. Apoptosis is something that happens all the time in our bodies and in our cells. They happen all the time in our bodies, and they are necessary for us to live. They are what protect us from specific diseases or pathogens, kind of like this. If a cell is damaged in any way, shape, or form, the cell will essentially kill itself to save us. That is a good thing. Necrosis does not do that. Necrosis is induced apoptosis. That means that some sort of pathogen is murdering the cells. Necrosis is murdering of cells. Now, at any point that you see in here, apoptosis can't happen if you mess with any of these. Specifically, it's really hard to see. Thanks, projector. But this is actually a J and K enzyme. Somewhere in here is there it is, P38. And what anthrax actually targets is in this box right here, specifically your MEK1. And this is so expertly named mitogen activated protein kinase, which is part of the MAPK pathway. The MAPK pathway starts with your receptor tyrosine kinase, or it could be, I believe this is also receptor tyrosine kinase. But pretty much, again, I say expertly named because it goes down the mitogen activated protein kinase to activate a mitogen activated protein kinase to activate a mitogen activated protein kinase.
Yeah, that's right.
Again, expertly named, I hate it. It made me go on the loop for so long.
It's better than calling it like Schwartz syndrome or something. It's like, what does that mean?
Yeah,
Like,
I was so confused for so long, and then I found out I was like,
yeah, I studied that in graduate school.
To make it easier though, it can also just be called MEK1 and 2. MEK1 being mitogen activated protein kinase. Yeah, you get it. So, MEK1 and MEK2 will directly communicate with ERK, which is extracellular signal regulated kinase. And this ERK,
He's in the box.
It's so hard to, yeah, there it is. Yeah, there it is. It's so hard to see. I hate that it's blurry. ERK is what directly goes into the nucleus to initiate transcription. And if any one of these is messed with, then ERK is not communicated with. ERK does not go into the nucleus. Apoptosis is initiated and starts a cas-phase cascade. And again, that's what we want. If something's messed up, we want apoptosis to happen. I want to bring these pictures back up. Because earlier I mentioned about your protective factor, whatever it is. And just so you remember, that's the image that I put up earlier. And your edema factor and lethal factor. Now, when the protective antigen binds to your receptor tyrosine kinase, it's going to recruit any number of lethal factors and edema factors at a 3-to-1 ratio or 4-to-1 ratio. It is a 3-to-1 ratio if it is if it is a heptamer PA unit. And if it is an octamer unit, it recruits at a 4-to-1 ratio. So it could be all lethal factors, it could be all edema factors, it could be a mix of the two. When these enter the cell, the damage begins right there, because first, lethal factor doesn't actually look like this. This green portion is missing from lethal factor when it enters the cell. This, if I can just put back to it, your lethal factor induces, we're going to call it a conformational change on MEC1, but what it actually does is it takes a bite out of MEC1. It is removing a chunk of MEC1 and putting it onto itself. So if MEC1 is damaged, what happens to the rest of the pathway?
Shut down.
It shuts down. It can't communicate with ERK. ERK can't go into the cell, which induces apoptosis. But because it's pathological, it is
Necrosis.
necrosis. So there is lethal factor, but what about edema factor? Edema factor is actually pretty cool. And I hate saying that, because I mentioned earlier that this is a calmodulin protein, right? Well, calmodulin is needed for regulating calcium inside of your cells. I think specifically in your myocytes and sarcomeres, it's like a cardiac protein. Your edema factor enters the cell, and it takes a calmodulin, integrates it into itself, and becomes a cyclic AMP. It is a literal mimic of cyclic AMP, which increases cyclic AMP levels. If you increase cyclic AMP levels, you then induce edema, which is fluid buildup in that part of the tissue, specifically for this one, in the lungs. And everything that I just said is pretty much the pathway that I'm gonna run through real quick. So those receptor tyrosine kinases that I've been talking about earlier, if we all remember, if a ligand binds to an RTK, they dimerize, they pull together, and then you can initiate a protein-protein signaling cascade, something like that. So the two receptors that it can bind to is CMG2 and TEM8. Now these do different processes, like different signaling, but for the purpose of Anthrax, these do the exact same thing. Your PA is first going to bind to either one of these. I'm just going to go with this side. I'll probably flip. Sorry in advance. Your PA is going to bind to your CMG2. The PA is going to be cleaved by furin, which a 20 kilodalton size PA unit is going to be removed, and we kind of just forget about that. It doesn't come back. The remaining 63 stays there, and then it propagates more PA proteins, which forms that heptamer or octamer ring. Once it does that, you have your 7 or 8 PA unit. Your EF and your LF, either or, is going to bind to that heptamer octamer ring, and beta-arrestin 2 is going to recognize, now hold on, something shouldn't be going on. I need to pull this back into the cell. So beta-arrestin 2 endocytoses the receptor in order to stop it, but that's exactly what Anthrax wants. It wants to be taken into the cell, because if it's not, these things can't do anything. They have no effect on the cell whatsoever. So they are endocytosed, and that's when we get into the early endosomes, which is just packaging, and you're trying to figure out where we're going now. And there's two pathways that the edema factors and the lethal factors can go do. One is specifically just for your lethal factor. Your lethal factor will be sent to a late endosome in which it is ejected out as exosomes. Now, I said earlier that your LF and EF and your PA don't do anything if you're outside of the cell, right? But if you're in an exosome, those can be uptaken by other cells. That's a good thing. We can take those up. We can recognize that. But there's a lethal factor there.
Yeah.
So the lethal factor is uptaken by naive cells, and then that's where it starts doing its damage. Starts pretty much deleting mechs. Or it can go into a different late endosome or different process. And both these can be spit out via Brownian movement. I looked this up. It's kind of just like random movement, except the cell just goes outside. In which then it starts attacking the intracellular matrix of the cell, where LF starts decreasing the amount of mechs, which induces necrosis and hypoxia, and your EF becomes a camp, increases camp levels, and induces edema. Before I move on, do I have any consequence concerns so far? Okay. So that is it for the biochemistry of how this actually works. What I'm going to go through right now is the types of anthrax that can happen. And there are 5 main types, which I mentioned earlier, which is your cutaneous, inhalation, GI, injection, and Welter's. And we're going to start with our cutaneous. And I want to mention first. So, what is cutaneous anthrax? Well, this is anthrax of the skin. You get anthrax of the skin if you are handling contaminated products. Generally speaking, this is from if you're a farmer or you're working in a mill or something like that, you're handling these contaminated end products. And normally, anthrax can't get on your skin because your skin is a barrier. Your skin is a shield. That's a good thing. But if you have an open wound, then anthrax can go into your body. Did you just shut down? Okay, that was the laptop. That was the monitor, my bad. Then it can go into your skin. And the incubation period for this is about 1 to 5 days. And practically speaking, incubation just means that it's doing nothing. I say practically because what it's actually doing is germinating inside the body, and it's propagating. So you won't notice this for about maybe 48 to 72 hours before you start seeing signs and symptoms, which can include your small, itchy blisters or bumps, painless red papule, and the hallmark system, your black sore. Which, if you want to look away now, this is your time, and bye. So, this first image up here is, this is about 48 hours after someone got anthrax under their skin, which, if left untreated, can become much bigger. And then, if that is left, well, that's how you get this charcoal-like texture. So this literally looks like charcoal. I was like, oh my God, that's messed up. That's terrible.
And that's because it's producing the necrosis locally.
Yes.
Right there. Yeah.
And if you're curious about, I had to look this. I'm glad I looked this up because the black coloration is due to hypoxia. So necrosis is induced, which this is necrosis, and then there's no oxygen that can get to these cells, so it turns black. Next, we have our inhalation. Now, without even thinking, inhalation is, as I mentioned, the worst anthrax. Cutaneous is the best kind of anthrax you can get. Why do you think? Just don't even think like super technical about it.
Your lungs. They got a lot of antibiotics.
Your lungs.
It's got a lot of.
Your lungs. I mean, you just.
Your lungs will die and you will
Versus on the
die.
arm is one thing. You can't breathe.
The immune system gets.
Respiratory arrest.
You can see cutaneous.
Yeah.
You cannot see inhalation.
Yeah.
If you see cutaneous anthrax, you're like, oh my God, and then you run and go get that figured out. If you see inhalation,
Let's think about
you know
it.
what the worst symptom you can get? Flu. I have the sniffles. Oh God, what do? I just stay home and I try to work this out.
Then your
That's
lungs
terrible.
closed. Yeah, that's really bad.
You have so much more lymph nodes in your lungs because it is an outside organ. It is exposed to the environment, it's exposed to the world. Your skin, it's a barrier. It's supposed to be like that. So you don't need that many lymph nodes. Inhaling anthrax is the most lethal because you cannot see this, and when you have these signs and symptoms, I'm just sick. I'll just go with that. What's even worse is that the incubation period for this is about 4 to 6 days. They're all about 1 to 7. And I see most say 1 to 7, but they incubate for about 4 to 6 days. You don't even know that you're sick. And then by the time you do realize it, the worst happens, you die.
This works very similarly to ricin.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that scene in Breaking Bad where,
Hmm.
anyway, I don't want to bring that in.
Yeah,
that's- I was just gonna ask my own question, like how, like with how, I mean, your expertise on such matters and such things like ricin is involved in like stopping something, and then stopping that induces apoptosis. And then you also have in this one, you've got like elimination. It's kind of like mimicking, but it's like elimination of that thing to where you can then produce necrosis in mass. Is that like common among most bioweapons and stuff? It's just like a like subverted silent attack that
That's a fantastic question. So the World Health Organization has 6 major Class A bioweapons. This is one of them. Then you have botulism, so anthrax, botulism toxin, ricin, Yersinia pestis. What was the other two? Oh, my buddies on the recording store are gonna make fun of me. I can't remember. But for the ones that I do remember, the reason that they're Class A bioweapons is because they can be easily made and they can be easily disseminated. That's what makes them extremely dangerous. That's why these are popular biological warfare agents. It's because they can be easily made, like botulism toxin can be made in a can left in the sun. I can make that easy. And I'm not gonna.
Don't do
That's-
that.
Don't do
no,
it.
that's terrible. Don't do that. But yeah, so does that answer your question?
Yeah, it says smallpox, like tularemia.
It was. Tularemia and smallpox, that's what it was.
Right. So,
I mean, more mad stuff because I looked this up yesterday. I was like, oh yeah, I remember all this.
What was the other one, smallpox and what?
tularemia,
Tularemia.
plus Ebola, Marburg, like
Oh, man.
other horrible.
Yo, Marburg was breaking out the other day.
Anyway, so
In,
going
like,
back to this,
Africa.
there's that yellow hazard sign. You want to go ahead now, and boom. Yeah, this one's a lot more tame.
Oh.
If you don't know
That's terrible.
how to read an X-ray, here's a quick crash course.
That's not how it should look.
Here's a quick crash course. So on this side is a healthy X-ray. This is what you should be seeing. When they blast X-rays into your body, what they're looking for is any X-rays that cannot penetrate something. If it can't penetrate something, then that means it's absorbed and white light is made. If it doesn't penetrate anything, it just keep going and then there's no light that's made. So on this side, you can see the general area for your lungs. So thank God, that's very wide and open up. So you kind of see in the middle, there's your heart. If you really want to look, you can't, it's blurry. The aorta, and then you have your inferior vena cava, which is your inferior vena cava. That's a good looking X-ray. That's a great one. We want to see that. That is not so good. That's suboptimal.
That's terrible. Suboptimal.
This is due to that edema that I was mentioning earlier from the edema factor and necrosis in the lungs. So there's a lot of crap going on in here. Next, your GI anthrax. How do you get it? Handling contaminated products. Who would have guessed? This time you get anthrax from eating it, and this can be raw or undercooked. So be careful about that. This is necrosis of the GI tract, which can actually induce ulcers into your stomach. And what's so funny about this is that every single sign and symptom for anthrax is completely different. For example, the most notable sign and symptom for GI anthrax is swelling of the neck or neck glands. I would have never thought that in my life. Like, yeah, you got the nausea, and vomiting, and bloody diarrhea, stuff. That's
This
just
is why you think about cows with anthrax.
Moo.
Is that why? So, because you can catch it from them by eating them, maybe?
Yeah, well, I'm not actually sure. I should probably look that up. I have no idea. And there's that yellow image again. If you want to look quick, go ahead. This one's actually a little bit messed up. And boom. So,
Ew.
What?
this one's a little bit,
Okay.
it's a little bit misleading. This is technically GI anthrax, but this person, this person ate anthrax, and instead of it going down into their GI tract, it actually got caught in the back of their throat. So you can still see like the red papules that start to begin at the back of the throat, and this is actually a special case of anthrax, which is caseous anthrax. I think I was saying that right. I don't know. Caseous necrosis, sorry. Caseous necrosis. Caseous necrosis can form granulomas. And Who would have guessed if you get anthrax, you're at risk for cancer? Every single disease is at risk for cancer. You can't do anything anymore. I should actually, I'm not gonna go back to that image because it is a bit weird. I should actually mention, at that point in time when I saw that image, Google was like, hey, you still have Safe Search on. And I'm like, oh, cool, I can finally get the better images. Yeah, that was a mistake. Yeah, that was a straight nightmare for a while. I was like, oh God, these people are messed up. And last but not least, we have our welders and our ingestion anthrax. And these are very case by case. I say case by case. Welders, there's only been about 6 or 7 people, I'm gonna say worldwide, don't quote me on that part, but there's about 6 or 7 people who have been infected with welders anthrax, and there's been about 5 people infected with injection anthrax, and that's specifically from the UK, from trying to inject heroin, those needles contained with anthrax. Yeah. Welders is treated like inhalation, and injection is treated like cutaneous because there's so little of them, so it's really hard to figure out what the incubation periods are and what the signs and symptoms are, so we just kind of treat them as inhalation and cutaneous. How am I doing? Yeah, I don't want to shut up. All right, treatment. So there are two types of drugs that I was able to find. The first one being your tetracyclines, which are a general class of drugs that targets the ribosomal units of prokaryotes. And what you're seeing on the screen right now is doxycycline. And then there were the FDA-approved vaccines, which is Biothrax and Cyfendus. Now, for your tetracyclines, how they work is that they are going to bind to the 30, there's a little bit of genetics in the cell bio, so sorry. Your tetracycline is going to bind to the 30S subunit of your ribosome, because ribosomes are made of 2 major subunits. And it's going to block the A site, the entry point for your mRNA. If you block the A site of your mRNA, you cannot make proteins. Over time, if you can't make proteins, you're SOL. You die. And this is really cool. I'll be honest, I don't know what these are. Like, it's the same thing. I could not interpret these well. But this is a generic tetracycline. It wasn't actually doxycycline. I couldn't figure out what it was. They just said generic tetracycline. The A ring on this tetracycline is actually going to bind to an exposed sugar backbone on the H34 subunit of the 30S subunit. And that's pretty much how, that's just it. It just blocks that spot, which is great. And we're going to go into the most complex biochemical thing that I could find for all this. Never mind, I lied to you. I couldn't find anything on these. It's disappointing. Yeah. I was actually really disappointed to find out that the 2 main vaccines to prevent and treat anthrax are relegated down to an FDA description that they submitted, which just uses and abuses the antibodies of your lymph. That's great. Thanks.
You're not going to get anthrax though.
You're not going to get anthrax. Funny enough, if you are a farmer,
around it or something, like you did this vaccination.
Do what?
If you're around it, commonly you would get this vaccination?
Yes. So if you're a farmer or set or you're around this is actually an annual thing you gotta get. Same thing for your animals. And do I have any questions?
Woo!
At the end of this?
I have a question.
Yes.
So if you go to the slide where you're showing the lungs, let's say a person goes to the doctor and says like, I have flu and it's really bad, and then the doctor's like, I might give you a steroid, and then starts, hearing the lungs. What could they hear? Is there a possibility that they can catch it right then and there?
So
They would hear that.
yeah, they
the
would definitely
flu.
hear the flu that's in your lungs, and this is completely shooting in the dark. It's like I couldn't exactly tell you, but they could definitely hear the fluid in your lungs. And one of 2 things would happen. They'd say, oh, well, it's this, or we're going to do every single test in the book. Because if there is even a chance that you have anthrax, especially cutaneous, if they see cutaneous, oh, you're getting every single test done. But,
Yeah, that,
Yeah,
I mean,
I couldn't exactly tell you.
they would probably suspect, okay, you've either got
Pneumonia.
Yeah, that's what I'm
or,
thinking, like.
but then they would do an x-ray and they would, if they saw that, first of all, you barely breathe in there.
Yes.
I mean, you would have deeper symptoms.
They're on a freaking vent.
yeah, but that's one of the main issues with inhalation anthrax is that you can't really tell unless you do those tests and you find those and you find the
And that
spores.
person seems to have had it for a lot longer. Other people.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that guy's probably dead. I don't know who
Yeah, I
that
was
is.
gonna say, I don't know if that guy came back.
It's like a Little House on the Prairie type.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
Not the that.
serious.
Okay, so